The following is rated NSFW. It contains strong language, spoilers, and adult situations, and may not be suitable for small children.
Order, please, order. Reels of Justice is now in session. The Honorable Judge Ryan Luis Rodriguez presiding. Will you all rise for the Honorable Judge Ryan Luis Rodriguez?
Be seated. I am Jack Swift Retribution. Today, we are hearing the case of the People vs. Fight Club. For those of you unfamiliar with our court proceedings, we are here to determine if this film is guilty of being a bad movie. As always in this courtroom, films are to be considered excellent until proven awful, and the burden of proof lies upon the prosecution to prove beyond a shadow of a reasonable doubt that this film is guilty. Before I hear arguments, I want to implore those on either side to resolve their internal struggles with split personalities. Here is a bottle of the prescription drug red herring doll, which will suppress one's destructive id. Please circulate amongst yourselves. There is no place in a court of movie law for manifestos, so please destroy the corporate system on your own time. Rules 1 and 2 must be observed and obeyed, regardless of whether or not one invalidates the other. Now that said, Mr. Caliber, you are appearing for the prosecution. You may begin your opening statement.
Thank you, Your Honor. Well, as a young teenage boy that absolutely loved action movies and cinema in the 90s, I could not be more excited about the movie Fight Club. It had a great cast, a great director, a great concept, and a wonderful story origin with the book, and I could not have been more disappointed. It went on for too long. There was way too much going on. It did not know what it was. It is a classic case of style over substance. It was very pretentious. And at the end of the day, I found myself asking, who is this movie really for?
Thank you, Mr. Caliber. Mr. S., you may present your opening statement on behalf of the defense.
On the behalf of the defense, I'd like to request that the judge recuse himself due to his lack of silly name. That is clearly your real name and not a silly judge name.
Shut up, counselor.
Very well. I am Jack's defense. Good evening, Your Honor, and peoples of the jury. What we have tonight is a baffling, confounding, and frankly vexing claim that David Fincher's masterclass in late 90s pre-9/11 filmmaking, Fight Club, is a bad movie. This claim, as we will see, is more divorced from reality than our narrator protagonist. As many know, and has possibly been stated, because I'm reading off notes I typed days in advance, this film is based on a novel. While it is always contentious to say which is better, it is noteworthy to point out that the author claimed the film to be an improvement. So this gives us rich territory to explore, and my defense will get into the messaging that both mediums provide. As a film in and of itself, however, we have a cavalcade of tour de force performances from a ripped Brad Pitt, a tattered Edward Norton, and a titted Meatloaf. We then sprinkle in some fun Easter eggs for rewatch value, some fun fourth wall breaking, and a sweet twist that rivaled any of its contemporaries. And voila, we have a fun, more importantly, we have a good movie. It is a movie that wants us to think, but there are several levels that this movie can be enjoyed on, and that's why it is good, and that is why it must be found not guilty. I will take this opportunity to declare victory, and the judge is just stunned by my opening remarks. Move for summary judgment.
Can the jury get some of that red herring doll or whatever that was?
Sounds delicious.
Mr. Caliber, you may now begin your arguments.
Now, I do believe that David Fincher did create a really cool world in which we're supposed to believe that this is a hyper-reality. But the problem is that the suspension of disbelief has just gone way too far. We're expected to believe that there is, how many hours in the day for the leading gentleman? Now, as you go through the story, how many jobs can this guy actually have? He's some sort of insurance guy or something like that. I don't know. I couldn't follow that. They just do the cool thing where they throw in a couple flashy pictures of people burning and an airplane crash just for the wow factor. That doesn't really add anything at all. But then you also get to know that he's also going to all of these support groups, apparently every single night. Meanwhile, spoiler alert, at the end, we find out that he is also Tyler Durden, who is also apparently a projectionist that also likes to spend his free time snipping in little pictures for these messaging to mess with people. Meanwhile, he is also an entrepreneur that makes soap, which of course doubles as the bombs per se. And then, of course, he is the activist and the cult leader to the entire Fight Club, and also a world traveler that apparently is something that he has been doing without the know-how of our narrator. Now, let me
He also
ask
works
you,
in a kitchen as well.
that's right, does a lot of things. And how does a guy go from all of this, meanwhile seamlessly going from one character to the next? Sometimes he's an observer as he is the narrator, and he's seeing what Tyler does. Sometimes he actually is Tyler, but then we're also to believe that sometimes Tyler is off on his own in another city for days at a time, and yet he has no concept of time. I mean, I get that he is an insomniac, and he says that he's never really asleep and he's never really awake. But please, that suspension of disbelief has gone quite too far into the absolutely ridiculous category. Wouldn't you agree?
I certainly would not, and here is why. When we have the narrator and Tyler Durden being the same character, that is obviously a very legitimate question to ask, like, where is the time, right? But as we hear when he's flying in the planes, he's like, gain an hour, lose an hour. We're living our life minute by minute, and we're always losing out on time. This is like you said, a cool world that was hyper exaggerated, and the characters are also hyper exaggerated because in its heart, this movie is a satire. It's holding up a critical lens in two different directions. It's holding up a critical lens to consumer culture. It's holding up a critical lens to this kind of radical counterculture, Rousseauian culture that Tyler Durden represents, that I'll get more into later on in my arguments. So as far as like the time dilation things, this is part of what makes the movies secret sauce. The part of the panache here is like it is ridiculous that all this stuff is happening. That's one of the points, is like, it's crazy that one man can do all these things. There's a part in the movie when they're in the car, and the narrator says to Tyler, like, oh my God, how come you didn't tell me about Project Mayhem or anything? We found this together. And he says, we are not anybody. We're not special. That's clearly not true, given all the preferential treatment that he receives throughout the entire movie. He is a special guy. And part of that is working those jobs, going to the support groups. He doesn't go to the support groups every night, as he establishes with Marla when they're breaking up the days. He ultimately stops going to support groups as Tyler starts taking up more and more of his time, which he mentions towards the end of the movie. He's like, am I going to bed earlier? Am I sleeping in later? Because Tyler is doing more things. So I think we can look at the time situation, realize the broader purpose of why it's in the movie, to establish that he is two people. I mean, the twist does have to happen, and it's a fun and good twist. So I think I would not agree with your assessment.
Well, my argument with that is that it seems to be breaking its own rules, as they are so opposed to the capitalism and the materialism that everything creates. And he says things like, you become nothing until you have nothing, or some bullcrap like that. The problem is that it breaks its own rules there's ads all over the place. They mention it more than anything. And rule number 1 of Fight Club was that you don't talk about Fight Club. Yet everybody seems to be spreading this word that it makes the rule absolutely pointless. And another silly little stupid rule, of course, is the rule of no shirts and no shoes. Yet, of course, the moment that bitch tits are included, of course, that no shirt rule goes right out the window. So
Objection. That was a practical matter because of the effects on Meatloaf. I would like that stricken from the record.
I appreciated that they did that, actually.
As I did too. Yes, as if you're going to break all the rules, I guess that's one good rule to break.
Well, and that is one of the things that we're going to be looking at here as the case unfolds, is this idea that Durden represents this freer Rousseauian man. Noble Savage is sometimes erroneously attributed to Rousseau, but it's illustrative for our purposes here tonight. So Durden is like this noble savage, this idea of be suspicious of the first man who builds a fence, right? And what he then ends up doing is making rules. He does start forming his own thing. So he tries to be like this primitive man, like this free man that's not molded by society or culture. Like think of a day zero man. But immediately starts making rules. Now, for the reason for the first rule of Fight Club being you don't talk about Fight Club is because, of course, he wants people to talk about Fight Club. You get people to do things by telling them what they can't do. You know, it's reverse psychology. The second rule, you don't talk about Fight Club. They say it twice. Little wink and a nod in there because they don't want people like Rosie O'Donnell giving away these spoilers at the end. You know, and Fincher does this in his movies, you know, the little winks, the little nods. The fact that there is so much product placement helps enhance the satire that is riddled throughout the film and is very important to understanding it. Like even when the narrator starts having these epiphanies, he's still getting his Starbucks, you know, they're still selling soap. A lot of it is dependent on the fact that they're still able to generate capital to finance these fight clubs. You know, like when the narrator is being escorted out of his office after beating himself up, he says, we now have corporate sponsorship. The line is very tongue in cheek. You know, we now have corporate sponsorship. But the fact of the matter is that they're still having to exist in this society that they're rebelling against. And that is part of the satire. That is part of what they want you to think about. It's part of the critique of the Durden side of the coin.
Well, where would this corporate sponsorship money actually go to? As you travel from city to city, you just see people punching each other out in back alleys and parking lots. What kind of funding does that possibly take? And of course, the house on Paper Street that, you know, in Act 1, they say you turn off one light bulb and another one goes off and there's no running water and the basement's flooded and there's electrical issues. Yet a couple acts later, without any major repairs done to this place, all of a sudden they're housing an entire militia with absolutely no problem. What exactly is this funding going to? The one basement that they fought in that Lou had to come down and do it, don't these grown men, doesn't anybody just own a basement? Why don't they just do it in a back alley somewhere? Whenever they talked about their house on Paper Street and they said that there was no neighbors within a half mile, why not just fight out in front of the house? Why do they have to go into this place? And why does it take money to go to this place? All that it seemed that he got out of it was those airline tickets that himself and Tyler used to go spread the word for their reasons of the greater good. But why was that even necessary in the first place if the word is just spreading anyway? So that he could go and tell these people backhanded things and say, even if I come back and I disagree with what I'm saying, then you're going to have to cut off my balls? Like, how insane does that sound? And again, what does that corporate sponsorship actually pay for? A bunch of black outfits that these gentlemen are running around in for some reason? Even though they showed up at the house and the first question that they said is, do you have black boots? Do you have black pants? Oh, you have all the black clothes? You could be in our club. Then what is it possibly funding? I don't get it.
Well, I think that's the idea. It's like, it's not that it's explicitly funding anything. Like I said, he said it with like a wink and a nod. The idea is that they are now financially independent, and that's by the lawsuit against the hotel chain. That's with the money that he'll be getting from his employer. As he said, he's still getting every paycheck, and he has those flight voucher tickets. You know, so the actual money that they're getting, it does finance the travel, as you pointed out. But it's also going to finance some of the other things that they need to like make, like the bombs and all those things. And as far as why does the Fight Club need to be in a random basement somewhere, I think that just adds to the whole club aesthetic. You know, the idea is the Fight Club is bifurcated towards the end, right? That's a very common theme we're going to see in this movie here is bifurcation. I mean, the main character is bifurcated. Fight Club becomes bifurcated. You have the Fight Club and then Project Mayhem. So you have Project Mayhem at the house on Paper Street, not Fight Club, you know, so the two aren't really the same, you know, and when Durden says, you know, Fight Club became Project Mayhem, you know, that's kind of a foreshadow to how the narrator is becoming Tyler Durden, you know, which is, again, he points out towards the end about how he's sleeping more and Tyler is taking up more of his time. So I don't think it's an inherent contradiction or a rule breaking in this universe, because we want these extremes to really be sticking out at us. We really want to be able to see these things. And I think that's what the director had in mind when he was putting these together.
Whenever it switches into Project Mayhem, they just seem to be this weird cult and low-level vandals that are just spray painting things and, I don't know, blowing up a little thing here and there. And then these guys just showed up. Like, what are they even showing up for? So that they could have no name and be part of something bigger? But what is this something bigger? So that they could spray paint things? And this is like lower than like a regular street gang or sex cult. Like, they're not, at least in a sex cult, at least you get sex out of it. I'm not quite sure what they get out of this. Whenever they're punching each other, that was one thing, because Fight Club is cool. Fight Club sounds cool. I got excited for the Fight Club. And then that was one of my main problems with this movie, is that the Fight Club aspect of it was only for about 20 minutes in the middle of a movie that was far too long. There was no main event in Fight Club. There was no major bad guy, unless you include Tyler Durden, who's also the hero somehow. The closest that we get is whenever he beats up a bleach blonde Jared Leto for some reason, for points that I still wasn't sure about. And you just don't really get the Fight Club aspect of it. If that's the case, call it Project Mayhem or Economic Reset or a schizophrenic's weird nightmare. You just get so many layers. They try to add in too many things. Every 5 minutes, it's something else. All it is doing is pumping out this weird toxic masculinity that men are idiots, that there's no women except for this one super flawed woman in the movie. And yet, they're just basically making fun of guys and making fun of how stupid guys are and how stupid Americans are, that they buy all this crap that they don't need, and just all the problems with the capitalism. But then at the end of the day, for what? So that there could be no credit card charges, there could be no debt. Like, it's just not a payoff whatsoever. It's just there's no Fight Club. That there's not enough of the Fight Club there in the middle. We get a little bit of it. We get a taste of it. That's the fun part of this movie. We signed up for Fight Club. We want to see Fight Club. We don't want to see dudes putting on ski masks, running around, taking out a coffee shop and a computer store or whatever else it is. It just wasn't there. It wasn't enough payoff. Toxic masculinity aside, it's supposed to be something, but I want more fighting. And that last fight at the end just did not pay off, because we already knew that he was crazy, so we already knew that it was part of his imagination. And then it gets to the point where he even shoots himself to get rid of his imaginary friend, who isn't his imaginary friend, apparently. Apparently he's also a schizo, so sometimes he is the imaginary friend, and he's going to kill off that part of him by sticking a gun in his mouth and shooting out the back of his imaginary friend / schizo alter ego's head. But yet he walks away fine. But good thing that the bomb still went off from Project Mayhem, from the soap that they made or something. Too much, too many levels, not really clear enough on any one aspect of it. Each act felt like a different movie. The first act was cool. Second act was really cool. Third act was just a mess. All around, too confusing, too messy, too crappy, not enough payoff, not enough Fight Club.
Now, the prosecution is making some very good points, but we have made a point in this court to not judge a movie based on its title. The jury is instructed to recognize this and to ignore that part of the argument.
I was about to raise that this court found that you can't use the title against it necessarily. But Fight Club is still an evocative and illustrative title, in my opinion, for this movie, because there is a fight going on. It's the fight between the narrator and Durden. It's this fight that exists, as some would argue, in every man. And I go back to Rousseau again, this idea that if you can go back to like the day zero man, that is what Durden is, And so then as we start moving into Project Mayhem, what is that really? I'm going to say a part of the defensive arguments that I had lined up here, but it's more appropriate here. It's every so often we're treated to political illiterates that think they've cracked the code, right? Durden is such an illiterate that if we can go back to this day zero that I've been talking about, that we can avoid all the mistakes of the past 3,000 years of society. And Fight Club shows us the folly of this in the extreme, because these projects always go to the extreme, starting with Fight Club. You said Fight Club's cool. Project Mayhem is a mess. That's exactly the point of the movie. Like I said, the first thing they did was make They ended up making rules. They ended up losing the individuality that they thought they were craving, that they thought they wanted. They wanted to be men. They wanted to be their own men. And then Project Mayhem took that away from them. So that is one of the critical lenses that's held up on the Durden side of the coin, which comes towards the back end of the movie, where a lot of the critiques on consumer culture are on the front end of the movie. So as you said, the movie does have a lot of layers. It does have a lot of levels, but they all do mean something, and they do all add up into a very important picture that when you take it all as the sum of its parts, it's a great synergy. It's stronger than the sum of its parts because it's a good story. It's great acting. It's stylish. And when you put it all together, you get that message. But if you're not in this movie for the message, you still get some good action and you still get some good character moments. So it's still a lot of fun, no matter which level you want to look at it on. So I don't think we can look at it and just say like it falls apart at the third act, because the third act is supposed to be that mayhem. That's why it's called Project Mayhem. So I think that's a bit of a moot point.
Mayhem.
Mayhem.
Shut up, Homer Simpson.
Prosecution, what say you?
All right, the whole movie just ends up adding up to just something. It's like a bunch of cool quotes and sayings that I am gonna have to disagree that they don't add up. Your classic adding up is 1 + 1 = 2. You could go beyond that and throw in a factor or a multiplier in there, but this is more like an algebra equation. It's way too many moving parts that you have to break it all down. And I'm not into showing my work. I don't want to have to work so hard to find out 47 levels of layers to a movie, especially with a movie that led you on that it was going to be about fighting. And then fighting becomes such a little part of it that it just takes all the fun out of it. It's kind of like the band Rage Against the Machine. I remember enjoying them as a young kid when I used to just bang my head as a teenager in the 90s. But then you actually get to listen to the words, and you actually find out that it's very political. Their whole heads are up their own asses. That's what this feels like. It feels like they're saying cool things, and they're showing you cool things, but they're just so damn pretentious about it. They try to be smarter than you. They try to think that they're smarter than you. And anybody who says that they watch it and it's about the deeper meanings and all the different levels, it shouldn't be about that. It should be about something way easier. And the problem is that they've created this realm where they make you kind of feel stupid if you don't totally get it on everything. It becomes one of these movies that's just if it's not on the top of your list as a grown man, it's like there's something wrong with you. And I don't like to think that much whenever I'm watching a movie. I'm not here trying to watch the most break down these crazy symbolisms on every single level and these little things in every single scene. I just want to watch a movie. And I think a lot of people agreed with me, and that's why whenever the ratings are very high for it, but nobody hardly saw it, that's why the box office numbers were not there, because word got out. They were trying to be too smart, too much, go over your head, talking riddles, talking circles, throw something cool at you. You don't know what's real. You don't know what's fake. And it's just too much, too many levels. And it's just confusing by the end of it. It just kind of turns into a mess. And I get that it is mayhem, and mayhem is messy. But at the end of the day, you got to reel that in at least a little bit. Have a few things and not so many holes everywhere. There's literally holes in every little aspect of this movie that even with that suspension of disbelief, it's not believable. It's watchable. Yes, it was entertaining, but once you try to actually digest what you're watching, and then if you actually do pay attention to what they're saying, you feel like they're more talking at you and trying to be the smartest guy in the room. And nobody wants to sit there and have a conversation with the guy who talks down to you all the time. Maybe if you are the guy in the room, check the room. But I don't want to be in that room, and I certainly don't want to be sitting next to that guy on a plane while he's just talking down to me, talking at me, talking to me like I'm stupid, like every decision that I make is bad. Sometimes I just want to punch somebody in the face, and I love it that they go there, because boy, does that really open them up to such cool possibilities. But then they just cram that pretentious crap right down your throat until the very bitter end that left me just wanting more. Even though I sat there for way too long, somehow it left me hoping that the movie would have ended 40 minutes earlier, but yet given me more somehow. I can't explain it.
You see, though,
The jury would like to hear some of these holes that were mentioned.
Well, like all the time that this guy supposedly doesn't have to worry about, all the time in the world, everything else, you're not sure what's real. Somehow they all infiltrate Project Mayhem, yet they infiltrate what, like a catering company, and they all work this one event. Yet he's seeing it from the inside, yet he's also inside the bathroom as Tyler. It doesn't quite make sense. There's too much of this. Bob, his name is Robert Paulson. He gets shot in the head. So you have a cop shooting at these guys, yet they're still able to pick up this 300+ pound guy and then get away, no problem, and still bring him back without being chased down or anybody ever getting in trouble. It's about as close as we get to cops. And all of this is going on, and it's just everything is way too convenient. It's way too convenient for whenever he's Tyler, for whenever he's the narrator, whenever he's this, whatever third person. Does this place even exist? Does everybody even exist? We don't know. They kind of put in this loophole where it's just, oh, it might be fake. Oh, it might be. So you're just fed this crap that you don't know what's fake and what's real. It just looks cool. It's flashy. It's shiny. The words are cool. Yet there's just way too many holes. I pointed out earlier, whenever the house wasn't even functioning, this thing's falling apart and the basement's flooded. Yet now there's 100 guys all living in this one house for some reason. It's perfectly functioning. It's just way too convenient. You have to delve into it a little bit more and have just a little bit of hope that the viewer has at least one iota of intelligence, that they will be able to see right through it, that there's just everything is problematic about it. And at the end of the day, it does not add up.
Oh, I would like to object to the idea that they would not be able to get Meatloaf back, because the guy who played the mechanic, Holt McClaney, he's yoked as hell, and he has been for some time. You know what I mean? So I have no problem with that idea. But again, though, I really want to point out one of the things about this movie is, and I think you're kind of hitting on a lot of the themes that make this a good movie. It's like, when it is Fight Club, we're all kind of with it. We're all thinking like, oh man, yeah, like you got to cut loose, like this was the late 90s. This was, I had mentioned in my opening, pre 9/11. Men had a different way of thinking than, could you imagine now, everyone listening, if our biggest existential problem was that we were working an office job? We've done so much since, we lived through 9/11. There were 2 wars. There was the Great Recession. There's current events, depending on the date someone's listening to this, so, but you have the luxury of an existential crisis in that late 90s, because we're basically at peak humanity. The culture and the consumerism that they hate, it's because they live in such a decadent society that they don't have to worry about where their next meal's coming from. They don't have to worry about their life, their existence being cruel, brutish, and short. Like, they actually have time to think about these and wonder what it is to be a man. And when you're on top, the only place you can really go is down. And that was what happened with Durden. He went down. He thought he could change the formula. He thought he had it all figured out. This is something we see from political microcephalics every single day, is that they think they have a better system. And it just doesn't actually end up working. So,
last word?
Yeah, the jury would like a definition on microcephalics.
Oh, okay. So microcephalia is when someone is born with like a small head, so you'd say someone's a microcephalic. It's like calling them a pea brain.
Hey, my dad was a microcephalic.
And God bless him for his service.
Which head are we talking about?
We are talking about the cranium, my good man.
Oh, okay. Because they had phallic in there. So.
Yeah. Yes, this court wants to recognize that big word had nothing to do with penises.
Oh, okay. Your
Noted.
Honor, the
noted.
defense is making me feel stupid. Now I know what the prosecution's talking about as far as talking down to people.
I don't think the juror's supposed to be deliberating so openly, Your Honor. Get control of your court,
I'll
or at
allow
least
it.
challenge him to a fight. Anyway, let me kind of backpedal here to where we were. Is yes, the idea of Fight Club is cool. This idea that men can be men, this idea of rough play, that you have to have some kind of male bonding experience. The author was actually talking about in an interview how like this is a more common trope in female literature, something like the Joy Luck Club that he used as an example all the time in interviews. I listened to like 3 interviews with him, and he mentions the Joy Luck Club every single time, which is, for people who don't know, the Joy Luck Club is a generational story of like grandmothers, mothers, and daughters who I believe they're all from China or at least from Asian countries, and the stories and stuff they had together.
And they all get together in parking lots and kick the shit out of each other?
No, they don't. That's the whole point. And
That's the director's cut.
that is literally the point of the Joy Luck Club, is they talk about having a fight club and don't do it because they're women. But then in Chuck Palahniuk's Fight Club, he says, so this is like the male version of that. And where this toxicity that was mentioned can also be viewed as necessity, because men have historically been, and this is not to denigrate any women in any line of service to the country, in any role civilly either, but historically men have been the warriors, and a big part of that has been viewed contemporarily, at least to when this novel was written and the film was made. There's some toxicity to that, but it was also necessary. I think it's the Orwell quote, about like hard men standing on that thin line ready to do harm, like that's what keeps society in check. And without proper outlets for men to be men, the argument that the film would be making is like you become dissatisfied, you become lethargic in this consumer dominated culture. And it's interesting now that we're watching it in 2020, because in the late 90s, they had the Cold War was over, they had the peace dividend, and they were showing what they viewed, and by they I mean the filmmaker and the author, they were showing 2 basically unattractive paths we could take. We could keep going the decadent route, or we could go the Rousseauian route and like try to go back to day 0. And they're both unattractive, because you hate the guy's life when you see it. He's talking about everything's a copy of a copy. He's looking at his boss, and his boss is just that typical get your reports in kind of thing. That kind of Office Space mentality that was also contemporary around here. I mean, when you look, and I say pre 9/11, it was not a joke. I mean, if you look at these late 90s movies before 9/11 hit, you do see this kind of Generation X, maybe very, very, very early millennial, kind of having a confusion about like what are we supposed to do? Like Fukuyama is the end of history when the Cold War ended. Like it's very gripping title here, but also very appropriate. That is kind of the loss that these men were feeling. So I think liking that part does make sense, and then hating Project Mayhem also makes sense, because you're like, well, now you've gone too far. And that is what I was saying earlier about political illiterates and microcephalics. And that always happens, though. That always happens. You can't go back to to this. So Tyler Durden, he's the deleted man, right? He's the undeleted man in this movie because he's here. But you really can't go back to that. You can't go back to that. As Rousseau said, you have to be suspicious of the man who builds the fence. But then, if you look at like Chesterton's fence, he says, well, don't tear down the fence till you know why it's there. We know why that fence is there. We saw Tyler Durden tear it down. We saw the buildings blow up, and we didn't like it. We're like, well, this is terrible. This is not how you affect change. This is not what you do. And it turns out we actually do enjoy living in a civil society. Now, maybe we shouldn't be so consumer oriented, which is a very, very legitimate criticism and is very, very well explained in the movie. I mean, I don't know if they mention it in the movie, but in the novel, he clearly says we sit on our toilets reading IKEA instead of pornography nowadays.
That is in the movie.
And there's and that scene is in the movie, and everything's popping up. He's explaining how he has everything, which leads Durden to say, the things you own you, man. And yeah, you know what? That does sound like something a pretentious dick would say, because Tyler Durden's a pretentious dick. You don't want a guy like that to be your leader, but he thinks he's tapping into something. That's the whole point. But he's not tapping into anything new. There have been men like him. I said the day zero man. Since day one, you've had men who wanted to be the day zero man. And Tyler Durden was just the 90s manifestation and expression of it. So everything you're feeling to this movie is legitimate, but that's why it's a good movie and not a bad movie, because it is hitting those notes. The movie doesn't think you're stupid, and you're not supposed to root for Tyler. He's the bad guy. You're not supposed to root for Edward Norton to go back to his normal life. That's crap. It was not fun. What you're rooting for is the Fight Club. You're thinking that's the middle. That is where we can exist in a way that gives us meaning, in a way that gives us power, in a way that gives us identity, where we can shed away all that nasty stuff that comes into consumer culture, but we can plug back in. That's what it was very important when he was talking about seeing people out in the world again, when he saw the copy boy, when he saw the maitre d'. And he's like, I couldn't even congratulate them on the fight because they weren't the same person. And so that is a healthy, such as it is physically, mind you, that is a healthier outlet than running around and blowing up buildings, which is the whole point of the movie. It's like, don't be a consumerist drone, but you don't want to be Tyler Durden going around blowing stuff up either, because that political philosophy historically has just never worked. It's always led to the kind of extremism that we see exactly play out in Fight Club. It's a brilliant commentary in a very, very good movie.
Does the prosecution have any further arguments?
The prosecution rests.
Very good. Defense, was that your final word?
Oh my goodness, Your Honor, I have so many more words.
Yeah, I know.
I would like to bring up, yeah, you do know. Hey, I see you in the jury. You sit down and you're going to listen. Here we go.
Aww.
That's right. So I think one of the things at the core of this movie is restraint, right? Too much, too little. That's what I was just talking about before. So it's very important that you do see that bifurcation in this movie, is the button-down, restrained life that Edward Norton's narrator character is living versus the extreme life that Durden is living, right? I covered most of the satire and the critiques here against capitalism, this idea of Durden being a Rousseauian, and also just another little piece in that argument. One of the first things you see Project Mayhem doing, they plug in an industrial magnet, right, in the video store, and they're deleting the VHSs, presumably. Does anyone remember what section they started in? It's okay, because I do. I watched the movie, you see.
I remember Alien was there.
It was classics, is what it said. And there's something really to be said about this idea that the political microcephalics like Tyler Durden express, is erasing the classics, erasing these ideas that are promulgated by the likes of John Locke or Mills or something like that. That was the whole point of tearing down those social constructs. So I thought that was a nice little touch in there that he was trying to.
The X-Files was in that section, so the jury likes that argument.
Yeah, exactly, right? And then, and then there was just some funny stuff in the movie too. I know we've got really heavy, and I may have got a little bogged down in some of the philosophical issues, but they're very important because they're in the movie. But, there's a lot of funny stuff in the movie too. Like when he's doing the groups at the beginning, he's in a sickle cell group. He's the only white guy in there. It's very funny. And he's mad at Marla's character for being there too, and then when he gets his luggage held over, that great character actor who plays the security guard explaining their policy on dildos. I mean, it's just hilarious. He goes, oh, you can never say your dildo. You have to say a dildo, So there's just some funny things that happen in the movie that is enjoyable. The fights are fun too. You do get to see some of the fights, but at the end of it, it really is about that message, about holding up that critique of consumerism and that critique of the Rousseauian man, and the extremes and how you need to find something in the middle, that's not going to kill you, because that was also one of the things with the narrator. He just really wanted to die. I mean, if you want to think about it, the narrator was just looking for a substitute for religion the whole time. He says, like, I found, like, when I gave up hope and I embraced, like, wanting to die, is when I started getting happy. He's like, well, that's religion 101, is finding purpose in death, so he was trying to substitute in all of these things that allowed him to live in the society he was in. And then when you remove those, you realize that you've been playing bowling with, like, those gutter bumpers on the whole time, right? And then the guy like Tyler pops him and you realize you weren't bowling, like, oh, it's not so easy to bowl a strike without those bumpers. So there's my mixed metaphor. I will rest my case as well, unless there's any questions from the bench or the jury, since we're letting them ask questions now, apparently.
Apparently, yeah.
How was your day today?
Oh, absolutely swell. Thank you.
Okay, make a note.
Both the prosecution and the defense have now rested their cases. The attorneys will now present their final arguments. Prosecution, you may begin.
Well, the idea of Fight Club is something that is a great concept that excites every grown man everywhere, and even excites women with the idea of a shirtless Brad Pitt showing off those chiseled abs every chance they get. Who doesn't like that? And David Fincher created a very cool world and such a beautiful, while being so filthy all at the same time. But at the end of the day, it was strictly style over substance. Everybody tried to be too cool. Tyler Durden was, in fact, too cool. They were glorifying just terrible stuff, and and I have to commend them for pushing it to the limits. They tried to find that line, and they pushed it as far as they go. But at the end of the day, it is simply a flawed philosophy, way too pretentious, and much like the finale of the movie with the final gunshot, it left me thinking, what the hell did I just watch?
Defense, you may proceed with your closing argument.
I am Jack's closing argument. Tonight, we have had a great and spirited conversation about this fantastic movie. We have explored its philosophy, its craft, and yes, its fun. The movie is very much a product of its times, but some of these late 90s conditions can still be related to this crazy world we live in now. As I pointed out, it's hard to imagine our biggest problem being that we're in an office job. But Fight Club shows measured answers tend to yield more satisfactory results, and that is a lesson worth taking to heart. So in this film, you can come forward for the meditations on what it is to be a man, or a man's role in society. You can come for the slick production values and high-class acting. And of course, there's the punches and the twists we get along the way. This movie has something for everyone and can be enjoyed as a good movie by everyone. But be sure to watch it a time or two, because you never know what goodness you'll miss in the blink of an eye or a chance of a frame. Thank you, Your Honor, and peoples of the jury, for your time.
Thank you both. Members of the jury, Mr. Rodriguez, is it? Mr. Haslar, Mr. Maynard, you have all heard the testimony concerning this case. It is now up to you to determine the facts. The bailiff will now escort you to the deliberation room.
This way, you filthy buggers.
All right, guys, some very interesting arguments here, very thick and dense. Ben, what did you think of what everyone had to say?
Well, I think that the prosecution may have seen this film misadvertised. It seemed to me like he was sort of expecting like a Rocky Balboa sort of thing or something like that, with not enough Fight Club. This movie came to me as advertised, a movie that's about like primitivism versus capitalism. So I watched it with that in mind, and I knew a lot of people that were like talking about Tyler's philosophy even before seeing it. I came to this movie a little late because my mom wouldn't let me watch R-rated movies. So I came into it kind of knowing what it was. when I watched it, I did like it from that perspective. It is very much the movie I would recommend to someone who's looking for a movie that's a commentary on primitivism. Uh, I did like, however, that the prosecution pointed out little things that bug me almost each time, particularly how Edward Norton shoots his brain and just like perfectly lobotomizes Tyler out of it. I never understood how that worked.
Yeah, that bothered me for a while too. And then upon viewing this for this trial, what I realized is that he willed Tyler away in the same way that he willed the gun into his hand. He said, I make the rules. And if I tell you I'm shooting you in the head, Tyler, I'm shooting you in the head. Like, you are just in
So
my
you're saying
mind.
he didn't actually shoot himself, and that's just like another
Oh, no, I
of-
think he shot himself, but I think where he shot himself is arbitrary. Like, he could have shot any part of his head.
the brain is
all that was
arbitrary.
right.
Well, it's kind of the
no,
Neo moment.
to me, what's important is that he believes he shot Tyler in the head.
Yeah, it's the
with
moment
Neo
where
moment.
he sees the Matrix. He uncovers what his potential is at that moment.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's not that he physically shoots, the section of the brain where Tyler resides. He could have shot the other side of the brain if he wanted to.
If they were doing that, I might have preferred like more of the switcheroo where like he shoots Tyler and Tyler's invincible, and then he shoots him again and Tyler's like, oh, or something like that.
Well, but he does shoot Tyler in the chest a couple of scenes earlier.
And he's
it was
invincible,
nothing.
right? Yeah, I would like to see
Right.
that like replay again. And
Because
like,
he
wait,
didn't
really
he
is a
didn't
Neo
believe
moment.
he could hurt him yet. Like he didn't, he says, I think a few seconds before he shoots him, like he realizes the game, and that's how he gets the gun in his own hand. The gun's not in your hand, it's in my hand. And then, I'll shoot you in the head if I want,
But he didn't have to shoot himself. I mean, I'd agree with you if he shot Tyler again, having come to that realization.
But also maybe he has to wound a part of himself to actually like let go.
Yeah, maybe.
He can't walk away from it completely unscathed. He's killing an entire personality.
And
That
Tyler
can't come
can
with
teleport.
no collateral damage.
We've seen Tyler teleport around, so shooting himself in the head is... I mean, I agree with you. I think shooting himself in the head and killing half of his personality is stupid. I'd have preferred if he just blew his brains out and killed the narrator and Tyler.
I was
I don't
almost
know-
expecting that. So having him
That-
like kill Tyler and he's still like walking around but blowing smoke out of his mouth was a little distracting. I don't know.
Yeah, but he's got that great last line.
Yeah. And I also kind of agree with the prosecutor in that like the perspective of the narrator and Tyler being switched around kind of seemed lazy to me. I wish it was like a little bit more fixed, where it's like it's a good way to pull the wool over your eyes, I guess, but to make it like you weren't expecting that twist at the end, because sometimes it wouldn't make sense that this was all the same guy, so they had to put in that thing. It's like, well, sometimes it was like this and other times it was like that.
See, that's something I wish the prosecution had gone more into, is the inconsistency of the split personality and how it's presented. Like, I mean, there are numerous times where they're seemingly across the room from each other and people are addressing them independently. And they seem to go a really long time before someone finally brings up to them the fact that they're the same person. Like, you'd think that Marla would have let that slip at some point earlier.
I'm glad you brought up Marla, because that's the biggest missed opportunity in this actual case, is that nobody brought up the fact that Marla is essentially not only without agency, but she only exists in the story to serve as the woman who has sex with Tyler Durden and the narrator, and eventually gets to see it through. But she has no bearing on the plot whatsoever.
I agree with that, and even before this viewing, it bothers me that they like hold hands and watch everything explode, and it's like there's no romance in this relationship. I mean,
Not a victory.
Right.
the dude you spent most of the time with was an unconscious split personality who's generally a psychopath, and
was emotionally abusive to her.
Exactly. And well, even Edward Norton's emotionally abusive to her, like the guy you didn't spend as much time with. And so when they have that little dinner scene and he's like, oh, I really like you, I'm like, based on what? Like, you've been just cruel to her the whole time. And I totally get the physical attraction he has. That's why he resents her so much in the early meetings. Oh no, she's an attractive girl, but I'm saying that's why he resents her in the beginning at those meetings. He sees her as a type of girl that he would have liked to have, and knows that as the yuppie, scumbag dude that he is, he never stands a chance.
It's kind of the incel argument.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that he would need to be an incel necessarily, but yeah, he's cruel to someone that he can't have, if that's what you're saying.
Yes.
But does have when he's Tyler.
No, Tyler has her, not him.
Yeah.
Like when Tyler talks about sleeping with Marla, I mean, he's jealous. Like you could see the narrator is jealous because he knows Tyler is, as Tyler says later, everything he's not, and has everything that he wants and can't have.
That's actually the perfect way of phrasing it, because she's a thing in the film. She's not actually a living, breathing person.
I agree. She's not really developed much. She's like, she's a strange character for sure. And she is just sort of a device that's used, right, and just kind of passed around. Like when she's put on the bus and then later dragged off of the bus. She doesn't have a lot of agency herself, which is...
You just needed that person that seemingly knew them both for that reveal at the end,
right.
and that's the purpose.
She's there for that twist, and primarily that twist only.
I think she exists to represent the sort of sexual desire that the narrator has and can't fulfill. Like he wants passionless lovemaking and all that, and it's just not who his personality was at the beginning of the movie. It's not the narrator's personality. It's Tyler's, but not his.
The other thing I was kind of wondering if like the prosecution would get into, because there's something that always seems disingenuous about this film almost every time I watch it, is having Brad Pitt talk about like how we don't need things. Like this guy is an actor. He's like, oh, and we idolize actors, and he is one. There's like sort of that level above that always makes it a little hard for me to take what he says seriously. Maybe that's sort of the point. Maybe that's why they can't cast.
Yeah, I think
Brad
that's
Pitt
why
as
exactly he's in it. I think that David Fincher saw that and knew that he could actually use that as kind of subtext. The fact that he is as famous as he is as fuckable as he is, all of that is important because it makes what he's saying a little more hollow, even without the audience having to do that extra work.
I mean, to me, less focusing on Brad Pitt, the man, and more Tyler Durden, the character, he has tons of stuff. He's got all those sweet leather coats. He's got those fur coats. He has tons of sunglasses. He has, tons of shirts and stuff that are, they don't seem like they're thrift store items. They all seem very nice. So to me, I see a disingenuousness to that character saying those things.
That was intentional, I believe.
I don't know necessarily about Brad Pitt. I mean, he's a famous actor. I don't know the guy, so I don't know how materialistic he is. Maybe you know him.
But anyway, all that said, to the defense's points, I do like that this is a movie that merits a lot of viewings. Almost every time I see it, which this would be the third time now, I guess, I do get a little bit more about it. Like the first time, I was just like more, I sort of knew Tyler Durden going in, but actually I didn't know him. I didn't know like the twist about it. I knew his philosophy, but not the twist. So a lot of my thought was like, oh wow, they pulled the bag over my eyes. The second time was a bit more about the philosophy, and I thought it was leaning more towards Tyler Durden's side of things. The third time, I was getting more towards the defense was thinking, where it's like actually somewhere in the middle, that these two people are very polar extremes, and the movie needed that to like pull you as the viewer into the middle of that. Which I think is very, very well done. I like movies that like make you think like that make you. The Prosecution obviously doesn't, but I like movies that have a lot of philosophy and have a lot going on, and a lot of repeated viewings where you can sort of dig in.
Oh yeah, I agree. I'm pretentious like you are, Ben. So we both.
I think
quite. Yes. Mm-hmm.
The biggest disappointment for me when this came out is that it was such a flop, because this is something that could have benefited from people being able to go back to the theater and actually have discussions afterwards, which is something that people used to do after seeing movies.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I thought was interesting about The Prosecution is he talked about, the film being pretentious and it talking down to you. And then later he said 1 + 1 = 2. Like, slow down, Archimedes. Like, if you're going to talk over my head, I'm stupid here. But I think we had an interesting case here because, neither one really likes the movie, do they? Like, I mean, the defense says he likes the movie, but I mean, he most of his case was shooting down the shallow politics of the film. So there wasn't somebody who like gung-ho loves this movie because they agreed with Tyler Durden, right? That was, neither side presented that. So I thought that was an interesting perspective, because that's what you'll hear a lot about this film, is people who just idolize Tyler Durden.
Yeah, that's what I thought coming in. People just loved his philosophy.
I think a lot of people do. What I found interesting is that, you know, even the defense says, where's the beautiful middle ground is the Fight Club. Like, really? You think it's better to go into a dirty basement and pound some dude's skull in with your bare hands
That's
versus
primitivism. That's like feeling something. Like in his other life,
versus
he's not
blowing
feeling
up
anything.
property? I mean, it's just property. It can be rebuilt. It's insured. It's meaningless. It's just buildings. Like,
It's symbolic.
to me, a man who punches another man's face in is worse than someone who blows up a building with no one in it. I mean, an empty building with no one in it. To me, there's no comparison there. Stuff versus people. You know, I would not want to do it. And then that's what was interesting. Both guys wanted to actually be in a fight club. I don't want to be in no fight club. Like, no way.
You wouldn't last 3 seconds in there. You'd hear you have to fight and you'd be out.
I'm already part of 4, and I just can't get a 5th one.
Well, you're not going to find it in this room, my friend.
At least it's a dirt floor. I could throw some dirt maybe in someone's eyes, but I mean, I'm immediately going for a weapon. I mean, that's the first thing I'm going
Hear me
for.
out here. Linoleum. That's all I'm going to say.
That wasn't a rule in Fight Club, was it? No weapons.
No, it wasn't technically a rule, but there is a circle of dudes around it that probably could stop it. One of the things that no one brought up too is like that bar owner who kicks the shit out of Tyler, like, just gives up. Like, Tyler is like, oh, I don't mind getting beat up. And the dude just gives up. And the dude's got such a kind of gangster, organized crime quality to him. Like, why didn't he just kill Tyler? Like, okay, you're going to spit blood on me. I'm going to leave, come back with some goons, and they're going to kill you.
I think that part is, it's kind of revealing the guy's impotence. But that is something that I tend to read into it. But that's taken like 2 or 3 viewings for me to actually come to that conclusion. But still, I don't even know if that's the correct conclusion.
Yeah, I don't know.
You might be right.
To me, it's just he just switched on to me, I didn't strike me as impotence, because I mean, he nails Tyler almost immediately. I mean, this is a dude who uses violence to get what he wants. I mean, there wasn't even really a lot of talking before. It was immediate punching. Like, after maybe 30 seconds of, you know, what the fuck are you doing down here? One smat-ass remark, and it's a punch to the gut. And then several punches to the face. And he seems like a guy who knows how to throw a punch.
Well, it's a posture.
So
it's kind of a formality at that point. You need to peacock a bit. You need to show that you're in charge. And then the second that somebody's dripping their blood all over your face into your mouth, you know,
I mean, if you're dripping
changes
blood into
things.
my mouth, I'm going to get some dudes to come back and kill you.
Yeah,
Like,
I'm
not
honestly
give in
surprised
to
that
all
didn't
your
happen.
demands. Not give in to all your demands. I'm gonna come back and fucking kill you. So let's see. Some other points that I thought, we talked about, you know, glorifying terrible stuff, but then once again we were defensive of the Fight Club. To me, the Fight Club is much more toxic than the anarchist stuff about blowing up buildings and destroying debt. Like, wanting to harm another person physically, to me, is much more toxic than wanting to blow up institutions. And then they said, you know, like, imagine the biggest problem you had was having an office job. And I think a lot of people can understand feeling mediocre, like that job would make you feel, and that making you feel bad.
You are not a beautiful.
I can speak from personal experience as somebody who, I mean, I haven't worked in an office for about 3 months because of the shelter in place, but yeah, it is a mediocre life.
Yeah,
it is nothing
and I think,
to be dreaming of. It's
Yeah,
something
and I
that
think
you do when you've kind of resigned your bigger hopes,
yeah, and
or something that you have
mediocrity,
to
I
do out of
think,
necessity.
Yeah, and I think that mediocrity like that can have those kind of effects on people. So, you know, and one other point that the prosecution made about beating up blonde Jared Leto, it wasn't for no reason. It was clearly out of jealousy, right? I mean, Tyler kind of rubs Leto's head, and it seems like Leto's going to be Tyler's new little golden boy, and so the narrator destroys him, says, I want to destroy something beautiful. And once again, that's another
Having a step
moment of jealousy. Yeah, and that's another moment of jealousy, like with the Marla thing. You know, he's jealous of Tyler, and that's why he likes to be close to him so much. Is Tyler is still what he wants to be and can't be. I mean, I was kind of all over the place here with this one. This movie, you know, I one thing the prosecution said, I did enjoy this movie a lot more in Act 1 and 2. And in Act 3, I think it falls apart, but not because all the anarchist stuff which I'm mostly down with, but more like the split personality stuff really falls apart to me. Like if you were to go back and watch the movie really close with it, I don't think it holds water. Like there's just, like
One that does is where he beats himself up in front of his boss.
that's fine, and that's the callback to the first, beating them up in the beginning. And even the travel, right? I mean, the narrator says, "How long have I been asleep?" He might have been asleep for a week or 2 weeks, and that's when Tyler's been flying around doing all this stuff, and the narrator's just been completely, not in control of his body at that point. And then he flies back and wakes up in the Paper Street house. So, but like peeking in with, Marla in the room. There's some other weird ones that are, I don't know, just strange to me that
Well, it operates on movie logic, which is weird because the twist came from a book.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, if you look at like The Sixth Sense, and spoilers, but Bruce Willis is dead. in the first scene where he's sitting with Toni Collette, and of course they don't speak, they're looking generally in the same eye line, so that later you can say, well, they weren't technically having a conversation, so I didn't cheat. But if we actually look at what that scene would have been like before the kid shows up, wouldn't he notice that she's just sitting in a room and not talking to him? So it's movie logic. But it works because eventually the stuff comes together and the other clues are more contextual. But yeah, the twist in Fight Club is, it's clever in that you don't really see it coming the first time you're watching it, but it's not something that actually holds any weight altogether.
Yeah, and upon this viewing, because I knew the twist, I mean, there are clues that they give you, right? Like, well, if you know it, Tyler, I know it, and I think he says that almost in the very first scene when it starts off. So yeah. I mean, if you were real eagle-eyed, you could see that. And then, of course, when he's beating up himself, then you're like, how is he so good at beating up himself? But like, one of the things where it doesn't work, when they're fighting in the parking lot and he's like dragging him, and you see on the security camera he's dragging himself. How can you? I don't think you.
That one I didn't like. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, I don't think you could lie on your back and scurry backwards being dragged like that. I don't think that's possible. And I think
we'll have to reenact here in the jury room. Everyone get on their backs.
Stop saying
that.
This
whole time. We're supposed to be sitting? Oh
crap. So anyway, we got to make a verdict here, and I think that there are problems with this film as far as the split personality and consistency on that. There are a couple of plot holes. Like I said, I think that bar owner would just kill him and stuff like that. But a problem that I don't have with the film is it being pretentious. I never thought it talked down to me. I was mostly along for the ride, not to the level the defense was talking about Rousseau and all that crap.
And when it does, it's Tyler talking down to you, and that's sort of a different thing, because that's like one specific character.
Right. I mean, yeah. I mean, Tyler is a pretentious douche. I mean, that is his character.
His argument is ultimately the one you're not supposed to agree with, so the more abrasive he is about it, the better.
Yeah, no, but Tyler's still funny and stuff. So, but I never felt like the film was talking down to me or making me feel dumb, and I would not have enjoyed it if it was just dudes fight clubbing for 2 hours, because I would just watch Bloodsport then, and like it's a much better film at doing that. So like I'm there for the half-cocked.
There's no twists in that one, man.
Well, he jumps up in the air and twists and kicks people.
The twist is that Jean-Claude Van Damme got another acting role after Bloodsport.
Jean-Claude Van Damme was dead the whole time in Bloodsport. They don't let you know, but he dies in the first fight. So I gotta just pick guilty or not guilty, and right now I'm leaning towards not guilty. I don't think it's a perfect film. I think there's some philosophical problems with it, and obviously it, can't pass the Bechdel test for nothing, can it?
Oh God.
But yeah, I'm gonna have to give it a not guilty. I don't think it goes to being a bad movie. It may not be a great movie the way everyone praises it, but I just don't think it's bad.
Yeah, I'm with you. And the prosecution's like opening statement, he like phrased it how people say like this is like the best movie you've ever seen. If it's not in your top 10, you're stupid. I don't really agree with that. There are issues with it that I think a lot of people who like put it in the greatest movies of all time lists don't quite see. But bad movie, no, it's certainly not. It's a very interesting movie, and it's well filmed, well acted, well directed, and well thought out as far as its philosophy goes, agree with it or not. So I'd
Yeah, I
also
mean,
have
Fincher
to go
is
not
great.
guilty. Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
Fincher
he
is great. So
Going into this, I think it was my fourth or fifth viewing, but I hadn't really thought about it much in maybe like 5 or 10 years. So I was really, I mean, I've always liked it, but I definitely went into this, especially these arguments, with a complete tabula rasa. Just give me a point either side. The defense.
tabula rasa. Stop talking down to me. I'm dumb.
Hey, the defense made a bunch of references to philosophers that I only know because they were characters on Lost. Okay?
Clearly, Ryan is a macrocephalic.
Get out of here,
Get
Mr.
out of the
Lawyer.
deliberation room.
You're not allowed in
Who
here.
put you in here?
Oh,
But
So what do you, go on.
I can't render it guilty as a bad film. I can't. I have thought about it too much, and I'm thinking about it too much right now to ever say that that it's bad. Bad usually
That's
means
also a very fair point. Any movie
okay,
that stays
that's
with
done.
you.
Yeah, even movies that I don't like, but if I think about them, I can't actually say that they're bad movies.
I don't know about that because I could think, and Plan 9 has stuck with me for a long time, but it's not.
And I
good
would say
movie.
that is not a good movie, but I don't think you could say that it is worthless.
Snuff films might stay with you.
No, it's not. Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff
Well,
like that.
especially
So
if you pay for them.
sometimes how bad a movie is what will make it stick with you, but I don't think that's the case in this situation.
No, not at all. So I have to say not guilty.
All right,
so
let's
then,
get out and render our verdict.
All right, let's do this.
Mr. Foreman, have you reached a verdict?
We have, Your Honor. In the case of The People versus Fight Club, we find the accused not guilty of being a bad movie.
The verdict is so noted. Fight Club, although you are not guilty, I do sentence you to 4 seasons of unacknowledged Mr. Robot homages.
very good.
His name is Dylan Schlender. His name is Dylan Schlender. His name is Dylan Schlender.
Hi, this is Ben Being, Morning Gazette. We're just outside the courthouse here after Fight Club has been found not guilty of being a bad movie. Mr. Prosecutor, you had a big, stunning loss today. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, you know, going into it, the defense made some very good points. In the rewatch, I noticed that I did enjoy a lot of the scenes just as a whole. Still didn't hold up for me. A little too much head in the clouds for my taste, but gotta go with it. Gotta go with my gut. My natural instinct was that I was against it a little bit, but after the defense, maybe I'll go ahead and slander on it a little bit, see if I could enjoy it a little bit more going forward, although I probably won't be rewatching it again anytime soon.
All right, well, that's good to hear. Hey, Mr. Defense, and that's your full name,
yes,
by the way, Dylan D. Defense.
Dylan Defense.
I'm suspicious of a man who builds a defense.
As well you should be. But, like Chesterton said, you have to ask why it's there. In the case I am here is to defend good movies. So if you know a good movie that is being slandered, call Dylan D. Defense of Reels of Justice and we will take care of your problem.
I think my mom makes too many Rosebud jokes. You might want to sick her a little bit. And
Anyway, I just want to say, what's important about Fight Club being a good movie is why people do understand it's a good movie. I really do want to say I believe the prosecution's point about people liking it for the wrong reasons. Tyler Durden is not a hero. He is a villain, but it's still a good movie, and I appreciate the court and the jury coming to this conclusion, so thank you.
all right, you heard it here first, folks. Back to you guys in the studio.
All right, well, that was it. Kevin, well done, sir. That was a fantastic battle, and I'm very proud to have been the first Reel of Justice boy to be on the defense for the show. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I would have prepared a little bit more if I knew the defense was going to come in hot like that. I'm going here off of a list of notes. I was jumping around. I ate a bunch of my words, so hopefully it wasn't too bad, and hopefully it made sense. I felt myself repeating myself. I wrote about 9 good notes, and I think I repeated each one of them about 5
So you got
times.
18 good notes out.
Yeah, no, it's okay because honestly, it's Maynard was kind of catching on to the game. Like, I'm not a huge fan of the movie because, but I think, and I agree with a lot of the things you were saying too. It's like I would be much more interested in something that's a little less philosophical because the philosophy of it kind of turned me off because I thought they were advocating it was supposed to be like a more of like a pro Durden kind of movie, but they have on the subsequent rewatches and just knowing more now about political philosophical history such as I do, I realize like, wait a minute, Durden's just the Rousseauian man, and that's terrible. So that was where I was decided to come down and realize that they actually weren't making arguments for him. And if anyone out there hasn't read the novel, it is very the movie is very faithful to the novel. I would say like 90% overlap. So kids, if you need to do a book report, watch the movie. Just the mechanic is driving the car, not Tyler Durden in the novel. That's the biggest difference. So go nuts.
There's a question I
you're
got to
the
ask you. There's a picture of you with the Fight Club soap, and that confused me because you were coming in hating the movie. How did that happen?
Well, I work on a lot of sets and being in Hollywood, and literally somebody had that bar of soap, and I said, "Let me get a picture," and I did it off of memory, off of the old DVD cover, and I tried to hit the pose completely off of memory. So it just so happens that I saw it and took the picture, and I wanted to throw it in there somewhere of about, we do not talk about Fight Club, and like, cause I don't want to talk about Fight Club, but couldn't work it in there. There was a joke in there somewhere. Totally flubbed it. If any of you smart guys want to come up with a joke there, I'd appreciate it. And it's a funny thing because I did not read the novel before. I still have yet to read. I've read some of Chuck Palahniuk's other work. And the first time that I watched it, I just do remember feeling like it was some sort of bait and switch, But then again, I was I think I was 17 whenever it came out. So you're expecting one thing, and then whenever I was in my early 20s, I was in the Marine Corps, and I had to sit there and listen to this guy talk about how it was the greatest movie. Yet we didn't have access to actually watching the movie because we're on a Marine Corps base. We only
You
have
just had to hear him talk about it verbatim.
so all it is listening to this guy, and it got to the point to where like I kind of hated the movie, and I don't think I had seen it since about 2002. And then whenever Robb asked me if I wanted to do it, I looked up at like the IMDb top 50 or something, and it's got like an 8.8, and I was like, nope, that's crap. And so I gave him a list of a handful of movies. He's like, okay, Fight Club it is. And then I did rewatch it 2 nights ago. And I mean, yeah, it is a stunningly gorgeous movie. I mean, I'm a big Fincher fan. Of course, it's got a great cast. The guys they look great, great actors, and of course, Tyler Durden. God, is he cool? He's like shredded. He talks cool. He gets the chick, even though
Rides around naked on a bike.
Yeah, I mean, he's just literally he's the coolest guy in the world. And
It's
then
that
it's
red
like,
leather jacket, man. It's that
no, the
Star-Lord
combination
red
of the
leather jacket.
and I noticed in the rewatch that after he turned bad, he had a mustache because
Mhm.
earlier in the movie he did not, and it's like,
Mm.
was that on purpose? Because we're ingrained to hate guys with mustaches. So no offense to anybody out there who has a mustache, but I
It,
felt
it,
like
it
that
might be
kind
that Star Trek evil version where they get a goatee when they're evil.
I mean, I think in this movie, if you're going to ask if something was deliberate, the answer is going to be yes, 10 times out of 10. I think everything was very deliberate and carefully choreographed to that effect. And hey, speaking of shredded, if you guys have Googled Kevin by now, you would know that he's in fantastic shape. And my guy, what are you doing during the lockdown to stay in shape?
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, no gym, so I am climbing the walls in here. I'm doing like prison style workouts. But no, seriously, I do beach body. I'm actually a beach body athlete and coach. You could catch me in a bunch of their programs as well. Fitness has always been something that's been very important to me, and it goes hand in hand with my entertainment career. I try to be. My goal is to be an action hero. Growing up, I wanted to be Arnold Schwarzenegger, so it's kind of the thing that I do. So Beachbody, I'm in 6 weeks of the work and the week of hard labor, great at-home stuff. If anybody ever wants any more info, feel free to hit me up. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of all the way across the board. Kevin Caliber on Instagram and Facebook. And like I said, big fan of the at-home workout. Beachbody is, in my personal preference, the way to go. We all remember those old P90X and Insanity ads. Well, I still have the P90X DVDs. That's what originally did it for me over 10 years ago. So you want something that's easy you could do in the comfort of your own home. I like working out at home because I could do it in my underwear. I don't even have to put on pants for it. It's very nice.
Now, I think people would probably pay to see that, man. So if you're going to start like
Little
a stream
tip
or
for the
something.
ladies.
Yeah, that's right. It was like the members only account, I think, is what
Yeah, there you go.
Unfortunately, all of his workout videos, he's wearing one of those thick winter jackets.
You got to get your sweat on, man. You got to get your sweat.
But yeah, this was a great trial. I think it was interesting to have two people who are kind of, staunchly against some of the philosophy of the film, which I think is an interesting perspective because you don't hear it as much.
Well, yeah, and that was my whole point, is that it's a misunderstood film. That people that go into it thinking that Tyler Durden is like the hero and something to be emulated, that is incorrect. And
No,
also,
there are no
advocating-
heroes in this movie. There's
No,
literally
they're not at
literally
all.
no one is admirable or really likable at all in the film,
What about
except for
Jack?
maybe Meatloaf.
We talk about him all the time.
Jack's a
Yeah,
distinct
no.
lack of
That's my
existence.
point. Is like, I think if you're going into it admiring one of them too much and not trying to see what that middle is, and Fight Club as the middle is the metaphor that the movie used. I mean, I didn't mean to imply that I would want to be in a Fight Club.
Were literally your exact words.
You would last literally 3 seconds.
Dylan would do okay in a Fight Club.
Dylan Defense would be good in a Fight Club, I think.
Dylan's pretty big. He's bigger than most of the dudes who were fighting in that movie. So
I feel very confident taking most of those dudes. I wouldn't be able to take Kevin though, even though I've got a couple inches and a couple pounds on him. He's just way too jacked.
And
yeah,
he's
I like the
ruthless.
line that he said, what do they start off as a lump of cookie dough, and after a couple fights, they're carved out of granite or whatever.
Yeah,
I think
it's something
carved
like
out of
that.
wood. They're made of wood,
Yeah.
I think was the term, which I thought was interesting. Like, wood, really? Because wood still chips. So, well, maybe
Wait,
it's a
no, that's-
softwood.
that's- No,
like
the
a
strong wood. It's
balsa
not
wood.
balsa. No.
Yeah, I thought it was maybe they're made of balsa wood.
like
Exactly.
mahogany or something.
Ooh,
like that.
mahogany.
Oh.
That's an
Yeah,
expensive wood, though.
Yeah.
But yeah, but overall an interesting trial for sure. And maybe it'll provoke people to watch the movie again and think about
And
what there
watch it
might
the
be
right
there
way.
to think. Yeah, try to watch it the right way, if there is a right way. Not on your head.
Absolutely.
So now usually we take suggestions from people. So Kevin, if you got well, actually, Kevin, before that, anything you want to talk about that you've got going on?
Oh, yeah, I'd love to put in a few plugs. I am on Future Man, the Seth Rogen Hulu original comedy. I play the character Blaze. We just had the third and final season come out on Hulu. I am in all 3 seasons, although not every episode, so I'm a recurring on that. Anytime you see Blaze, that is me. Real fun show to work on. Hope you watch that. I'm also on the Tyler Perry's The Have and the Have-Nots. It's a little soap opera, so if you're into soap operas and you want to watch on the Oprah Winfrey Network, it's there. It's hundreds of episodes available. It's always on. It's Oprah's #1 show. And I've got my own series called Job Guys coming out very soon. It'll be up on Amazon. There's a little bit of a hold on it. It was supposed to be up already. Hopefully by the time you're listening to this, you could jump on Amazon and click on Job Guys. And also working on my film 16 Bits. That's when I play a real fun character named Wax Waster. He's kind of my professional wrestling persona if I was to come up with one. He is a video game character come to life and a whole lot of fun to play. We're in post-production on that now. Should be available around the end of the year. So if you follow 16 Bits or Wax Waster, it's there. And next time you'll see me on is July 2nd is the season premiere of the show The Family Business on BET, and I will be in the premiere episode playing a low-level gangster named Rocco. So a lot of stuff coming out. Please give me a follow on any one of my pages. I'm mostly just Instagram and Facebook. So Kevin Caliber across the board, and you should find me. And I post a lot of shit. So hope it's cool and hope you enjoy it. I try to be motivating when I can, and like I said, hit me up if you ever need any fitness advice or anything like that. I'm your man.
Yeah, your
How
posts
cool
are-
is this guy? I
You're
love
doing
this
so
guy.
much.
No,
I know,
he
right?
is. Can
That's awesome.
I get a little wax waster? Wax waster.
Oh yeah.
Have you been doing like that through the shutdown? Did that like slow anything down, or was that all just sort of done before and you're in post production?
A lot of it was done before. Unfortunately, 16 bits. We did have to lock down for that. We were able to pick it back up, get in our effect shots. It kind of gave us a chance to look at some of the cuts that we already had, realize what we needed for filler shots, and it's looking real rad. It's fun. It's going to be a gross movie. It's going to be a lot of fun. So hopefully we get it done. I also did one pilot for a series through Zoom, and I don't know. Hopefully, we won't have to do that too often because I'd rather have a real DP and give people jobs and actually work in sets with people, not just doing it over. This is fine. We could do this over the phone, over the computer. But when it comes to actual creating, it's always better to do it face to face.
Yeah, totally cool. So yeah, you follow Kevin on social media. He's always got very positive posts, and there's a lot of shirtless pics if that's what you're into. So do you have any kind of suggestion for a film you've seen recently that you think people should check out?
Yeah, I've probably watched at least 100 movies already during the last couple of months. Average about a movie a day. But one that I just did a rewatch for the other night that I really enjoyed, that kind of went under the radar a little bit, was Upgrade by Lee Wanell, who most people know him these days because he just did The Invisible Man. But he was one of the co-creators of Saw, and he stepped out on his own. I'm really, really digging his stuff, digging his style, and the movie Upgrade was so cool. It felt like what Venom almost was and could have been if they got to go darker with it. Real fun movie, totally held up on a rewatch. So if you're looking for a fun action movie with some of those same capitalism, materialistic stuff that we hit in the Fight Club movie, Upgrade kind of touches in on some of that too. So it's a lot of fun. So you can't go wrong with that if you're into that sort of thing.
I think I've seen the trailer for Upgrade.
I have seen
movie.
it. It is a
really
good
good
movie,
movie.
actually.
This is like the
Very-
5th
that's
time
great
someone's
pick.
recommended it to me, so that's it. I got to watch it.
Fifth time is
Now
the
you
charm.
have to do it, or
Yeah.
Kevin's going to suplex you, man. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think he's a backbreaker type of guy.
Funny you say that. Wait till you see 16 bits. I definitely go chokeholds and backbreakers, and there just may be a suplex in there somewhere too.
Wax
All right, brother.
Oh, brother.
Dylan. His name is Dylan Schlender. You have a suggestion of something?
It's
you've seen
Ryan's
recently?
turn.
No, the judge gets to recommend.
Oh, fuck you, Dylan. Ryan.
I can recommend.
Ryan,
man.
shut up, Dylan. Ryan, it's your turn to suggest.
Ryan, recommend
You were the
Showgirls.
judge.
It's Ryan as Dylan.
I have
His name is Ryan.
I have
His
two.
name is Ryan Rodriguez.
So I have two. One that has something to do with the movie, one that doesn't. But about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we tragically lost a great director named Lynn Shelton. And I've been going through her filmography again to try and just enjoy the films that she left behind. And one of the best, probably her best film, came out last year. It's called Sword of Trust with Gillian Bell and Mark Maron and Michaela Watkins. It is a great little shaggy comedy that you will not expect to enjoy it as much as you do, and it's streaming on Showtime right now. And then I would also like to recommend David Fincher's best film, Zodiac.
Ah, yeah.
Fantastic
I do like
film. It's one of my
Yeah, that's a
favorites.
good, Zodiac
The
is
theatrical version
I really
is
like the
on
soundtrack.
Netflix, but you can get the director's cut on Blu-ray for like $6, and I would highly recommend that.
I
good.
love
You
the
would
soundtrack.
recommend people buy physical media,
Yes, I would.
Absolutely.
Especially if it's the
Oh,
director's
okay.
cut of Zodiac.
especially if it's Dimagen on DVD.
I did get it. Yeah, it's coming to me.
That's enough Dimagen plugging for this show.
There's
as
3
it is.
movies. We got to plug it at least one
The
more
Google
time.
analytics for Dimagen are going to go up 1,000,000% because of these shows.
Yeah, obviously. But yeah, Zodiac was definitely a cool film. Like I said, I really like the soundtrack. It's got the hurdy-gurdy man, and I love that
Yes.
hurdy-gurdy man.
Twice.
That's a good tune.
Gotta love Donovan.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, so that's it for this week. Kevin, thank you for joining us and coming on and telling us why you dislike this film. I think it's a perspective that a lot of people have not heard.
Yeah, appreciate you having me. I'd love to come back anytime.
All right, cool. We'll have you on, and now next time you'll know what to expect too, because we're just starting this thing.
Write your 5-paragraph essays.
You definitely don't have to write everything out,
Yeah, and you're the first guest prosecution too, so this is a landmark case here. So
That's true.
For other people listening, so that's a big deal, and I think you did very well.
When there's a Reels of Justice trivia game, and there will be a Reels of Justice trivia game, you get your own card there.
I love it.
That's going in my biography that I send around all my publications. It's part
Perfect.
of first ever.
Oh, perfect. Once they find out you've been on this show, you'll be blacklisted. Anyway, so that's all the time we have for this week, and thanks for joining us on the Reels of Justice, and we'll see you again next time.
Later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Later.
And if you'd like to share your thoughts on this week's trial or the verdict, please email us at reelsofjusticepodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Twitter @reelsofjustice and on Instagram, reelsofjustice. Also, check out our Facebook page, facebook.com/reelsofjustice.